Welcome. I'm Michelle Atlas, and this is Money Mastery for Mystical Women Entrepreneurs. And I'm very excited today to be talking with two of my friends and peers, Martha Langer and Catherine Rowan. And I know we're going to have a great conversation about the work that they each do, working with color essence and how the frequency of color and the way that we dress and up-level our appearance impacts our experience of abundance and money flow and prosperity. So I'll introduce Catherine and Martha to you so you know a little bit more about them before we dive in. Catherine Rowan guides women through obstacles on their journey to self-expression and leadership, offering a feminine reframe on topics such as power, beauty, aging, and contribution. She loves working with entrepreneurs to match their presentation with their message through her embodied branding color palette work. I have had my color palette done by Catherine a couple of years ago, and I'll say a few more words about that in a moment. Martha Langer, a vibrancy mentor for 2 decades, has been passionately guiding students towards health and vitality through yoga, meditation, healing, spiritual counseling, and color vibration and feminine embodiment and sacred sexuality work. After practicing healthcare law in the 90s, yoga practice became her doorway into this new paradigm of vitality. Martha's yoga DVD and download Transcend with Lisa Langer is used by hundreds of students worldwide, and her sacred, powerful book, Embrace Your Vibrance, is a transmission and guidebook for expansion. Her color vibrancy booklet, Which Season and What Colors and Essence and the Essence of You, is a fun poem that educates readers about their sacred essence in the frequencies of color. She also offers programs specifically for divorced women, as it was her own divorce that propelled her into the healing realm, and she believes that divorce can be a portal to creating a fulfilled and meaningful life. Welcome, Martha and Catherine. I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you. Yeah, so I'll just say a word here that, I have had my palette done, as I said, by Catherine, and it was about 2 years ago. And and I'm excited for you to hear from them because this whole area of appearance, physical appearance, is one of those areas that can be confusing to women in terms of, um, why is it so important? How does it up level our frequencies? How does it relate to abundance and prosperity? My own experience was that the work that both Martha and Catherine do has a lot of depth, a lot of layers, and is very subtle. It goes far beyond just buying pretty new clothes, which of course, is the fun part. But it took me probably the better part of, a year, maybe at least several months after I received my palette from Catherine to really understand the subtleties of how various colors really harmonize, with, in my case, my particular skin tone and coloring and my energy, and others that seem so similar don't in quite the same way. And then to, really kind of make the connection with how wearing, the right shapes and colors and fabrics really shifts my experience of embodiment and of comfort in my own skin, which then translates into my whole sense of self-ownership, and the way that I show up in my work and in my life. And I'm excited for you to hear their perspective on all of this. So, yeah, so I'll start with a question for you, Catherine. And I'm so curious. I know that I think that you have a lot of perspective and a lot of thoughts about why doing this work, why understanding your palette and working towards harmonizing your wardrobe with your vibration is so impactful in terms of just living an abundant, empowered life. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yes, I'd love to talk about that. So I think the first thing to mention is that I and Martha also, we're working from a perspective of a person expressing their natural essence, something about their energy, their soul, if you like. So we're not working from an image perspective. where you're creating an image to give a specific message. What we're doing is almost the opposite. What we're wanting to help a person do. And in my case, well, both of our cases actually, but I'll just speak from my own. I'm using quite often more tools than just color because, as you know, Michelle, I also work as a coach. I also do human design readings. So my interest is in helping a person align with things about their innate purpose, their innate energy, their design, their purpose. And so once we're getting all of these things lined up for them so that they're expressing a more authentic version of themselves rather than an image, then we really want the outer appearance to be an expression of that. We want consistency. So then when it comes to the entrepreneur, who is quite often they are their, they are their product. When they're doing their marketing, they are their brand. So we want to make sure that there's not inconsistency with their appearance. And where I think it really helps from the prosperity point of view is, I think there are several steps to this, but a next step, and again, for the women entrepreneur, many of us have what I would refer to as visibility wounds. And I see this as maybe part of the feminine wound. It's something maybe some of us hold individually more than others, but collectively, there has been in the past a lot of suppression of the feminine principle and women along with it. So this is one way to support women to step forward in their visibility in a comfortable way. I know I was certainly one of the people who in the past felt unheard, sometimes not so much unseen, but unheard. And when I started doing this work, it was like a real light bulb went off because instead of having to try to I could see that maybe some of the ways I was actually hiding through my clothing was actually part of the problem. And when I got the clothing bit aligned so that, I was seen rather than just the clothes being seen because there was something inconsistent in the way that I dressed, then I was more visible. In fact, then it was much easier for me to present on a stage or like this on Zoom because I felt confident. So that's, I would say, a major key for prosperity for entrepreneurs is getting that consistency there, which makes you more comfortable then in your presence, which makes it then maybe some of your marketing work a little easier, which obviously then has knock-on effects for your prosperity. And there are other aspects I could say too with regard to prosperity, but I'll leave it there because I think it will come out further.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I love what you just said. I love what you just said about about it beginning with connecting with your essence, and then the physical expression in the form of the right colors and clothing is an expression of that. So this is very deep work, and there's nothing superficial about it. Yeah. Yeah, Martha, I would love to hear your take on the same question.
Hmm. Can you repeat the question for me,
Sure,
please?
of course, sure. And it'll probably
Thanks.
be a little bit different too, which
Mhm.
is fine. So, yeah, so just wondering, your experience working with many women over the years, and in your personal experience, being so committed to wearing the right colors and the right color vibration for yourself, how that has affected your level, I guess, of confidence, and also what you see in terms of the connection between this essence color work and prosperity, and being able to show up to be paid well in what one does, or really have their one's business, the return on one's efforts in business match their efforts in who they're being.
Mm. Okay, there's a lot here, so I'll
Yeah,
try to
I know.
summarize. And I love everything that Catherine said. I want to try to not duplicate because everything she said was so wise and true in my experience as well. What's coming forth for me right now to share here is the idea, the really lived experience that when we are living in our colors, meaning there's a practical outward expression of our soul's essence in our day-to-day lives, our vibration is different. So I love to compare it to dating a man who's not good for you. Like if you're dating a man who's not good for you, it can be draining. It can be life force diminishing. It creates all kinds of static in life, right? And then when you're dating someone who's healthy for you, there's harmony and flow in general, right? And so to me, if we're wearing colors and the frequency of items, including hair color, including home environment, when we're out of alignment with our essence, then our frequency, our energy is usually very unconsciously drained, diminished, and can even create like depression or hardening or things like that. So conversely, when we are surrounded by the frequencies that are our soul's essence, we have an inner experience of life being vibrant, full of vitality. When that's the case, our actions, words, thoughts are more in alignment with what we're wanting and what our gifts are, because our color palette is a secret code to revealing our natural innate gifts, some which may be conscious, but many are unconscious, before we become aware of our gifts more when we are in tune with our color frequency. And so if our gifts are more expressed and we're more in alignment with understanding what they are and what our shadows are and how to transgress our shadows in a way that's healthy for self and everyone, then our whole life flowers open. This is my experience.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the idea that clothing, jewelry, adorning self is frivolous, I mean, I so lived that. I was like Miss Practical Lawyer years ago. So I totally resonate with the idea that like maybe I'm not worthy of spending money on myself, or I can't spend money on myself. I need money for other things.
Right.
I so resonate. That was me. And what I learned experientially over the years that I've been doing this work is that the more I invest in harmonious and aligned material items that support me, the more I receive money. And that money can come in from other sources. Very often for me, I'm a human design generator. So when I try to make money, it doesn't work. When I be my, vibrant, glorious self and feel well, and I'm not worried about money, but still showing up in my work and still showing up in my gifts and my coaching and my yoga and all the things and doing palettes, when I show up and do them without focusing on money, that's when I am able to receive money. So the feminine, right? The feminine gift is to receive, not to try harder. So the color palette as a lifestyle begins to unwind the masculine patriarchal concepts that I have to work harder to make more money. It starts to unwind that in the recognition that my beingness is an attractor field for receiving prosperity and to receiving the things that I'm wanting.
Yeah.
So generally, it's just like when I discovered after 3 weeks of, for example, like black is not in my palette. And so for 3 weeks, I played with not wearing black. And I found my whole personality actually change in those 3 weeks. As soon as I started to experientially understand the effect of how colors are making me feel and other people around me feel, I was like, okay, I'm on board. Like this stuff is powerful. And so just like Catherine, I took it on fully. And now I love sharing it with other people because I know how life enhancing it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I just adore everything you said. Everything that each of you said is so potent. It's so like, it just feels so spot on. And so beautifully stated, really, because you're offering a level of understanding that I think someone who hasn't um, gifted themselves this opportunity to learn about their own palette. One wouldn't understand this level of depth and subtlety and
Yeah.
impact, and you've articulated it so beautifully.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
Oh yeah, no, really, really. And as a generator, I really, really resonate with what you said. It's so funny
Yeah.
because I never really knew it was a generator thing, but it's so clear to me that it is it. I teach my clients that that we are the offer. That who we're being is the offer. What you do and what you create and do is an expression of that, but really, who you're being is the actual offer. And that includes, mind, heart, body, appearance, the whole
Yeah.
deal. So I so get that. And yet that is the most magnetic thing. Such a mystery how we attract abundance. And that is definitely
Mm,
a huge magnetizer that's invisible until it happens. Yeah.
mm, mm,
So, and that's been my experience as absolutely as well, 100%. And I never quite, you know, recognized it in such the way that you've just described it was really giving it language.
mm.
Yeah. So, a different angle on the language. Yeah. So, I'm curious, what kinds of, so in other than just this idea that maybe doing, up leveling your wardrobe and understanding your palette and aligning with your other than the fact that some women may think it's not a practical use of their resources, or that they have to wait till they can afford it until they're making tons of money or something like
Mm,
that before they can give this to themselves. They have so many other things to pay for first, type of thing.
mm.
What other kinds of, I'll say, misunderstanding or resistance do you find you have to kind of overcome when you have a consult with someone who wants to explore the value of working with you? Also, I'll go back to Catherine first, and then we'll ping pong back and forth.
Um, yeah, I think it's a really good question, Michelle. Certainly, I have come across that people who think it's it's I think maybe they don't quite understand the value that it's actually going to deliver. And it seems, I quite understand it, maybe it seems like a little extra thing when the entrepreneur has a lot of cause for spending money. And of course, it's like when they're looking at their coaching expenditure for themselves, if they're in a business program, this usually isn't included in a business program. So it's an extra to that. But what I would say is, well, firstly, what I said before, because we all know when we're in business that, the messaging that we put out in our websites and everything else, how important that is. But just going a little bit more personally, that expenditure on the palette is going to save a person a lot of money in the long run, because once you understand not only the colors, because although the palette is in colors, the service that we provide goes into a lot more can go into a lot more aspects beyond the palette in terms of, style and prints and jewelry and all sorts of things. So you're going to save because um, you're not going to make as many mistakes in your purchases. I know I was one of the people before I did this that had a closet full of clothes, but never seem to have the right thing to wear for a particular occasion. I
Yeah.
never have that anymore. I never have that anymore. Not unless it was something like a really, really formal occasion, which I don't just have something stocked in my closet for, because I don't do go to many of those. I would actually have to buy or rent something separately. And there are lots of ways you can do that these days, rent clothing for a special event. But generally, in terms of your day-to-day wear, your business wear, your leisure wear, once you've invested some money in the styles and the colors that suit you, you will wear them for longer. I know one of the things I was confronted with when I first did this, and I also experienced it in clients, is that certainly a couple of the designers that Martha and I recommend, because they're making clothes specifically for women. They're Their policies are all very ethical, they're natural fabrics, and they are a little bit more expensive maybe than, if you go to some the sort of high street type stores. Um, and that can be quite confronting. It was for me initially. So this is a sort of a bit of another way in which you level up your prosperity, because doing this work will actually bring a lot of your beliefs and associated feelings about money to the surface. So for all of us, in entrepreneurial work who are doing our personal development work and trying to work with our beliefs so that we can up level our frequency in different ways, um, this is a really good way to up level your frequency with regard to um, your your feelings of things like deservedness. Do I deserve to have these nice clothes? Do I deserve to spend this money on myself? And often that can be quite confronting for women in a family situation where there are, viewpoints about, no, this money should really be going to, something else for the family, and they aren't automatically seeing the
Right.
benefit to the family
Right.
of doing this. So yeah, I'll maybe I'll stop there because I've actually lost track a bit of the question and
Yeah,
whether
but
I'm
no, you're no,
answering it. I
you
think
are.
okay, good. Yeah. So there was just like there are a whole range of ways in which this that this work will will save you money. Um, and yes, sometimes it is a bit of a I think you've said it yourself, Michelle. Sometimes you actually have to jump in. It's hard to know everything up front because some of it's so experiential. You only realize that over time it is a journey with that palette. It's not just the palette's the start of the journey, it's not the end. And as you said at the beginning, it takes a while, but it's very worthwhile journey. There's loads that comes out. There's loads that comes out of it. And certainly, yes, a lot of things to do with prosperity money investment, which will only serve to up level to the place where you are aligned with some of those universal laws on prosperity, love, and moving away from the sort of lack and poverty consciousness.
Yeah, again, I love when you said you're both just speaking so beautifully, eloquently to this topic. And I feel like this is, working with women. Well, I'll say a couple of things in response to what you said. Work because I also work with women. I work around, money and deservedness and permission are hotbed words that every woman I work with um, seems to at one point or another feel very charged for them emotionally depending and I just actually had another conversation in this series where I was saying how depending on particularly how we were mothered, what our mother's relationship to receiving and prosperity and deservedness and permission was, it can impact ours profoundly in terms of, what we think we deserve, what we think is okay. And so, yeah, and it's huge. It's huge in our culture, and you know, this what you're sharing I can feel being energy sensitive myself, this really just energetically shifts where this belongs in the continuum of what matters and the prosperity continuum, and how we really up level and really places it in a very different place than I think most people think of it. It places it laterally, it places it really equally with other forms of investment in one's business, in one's health and well-being, in one's success, as opposed to, it really takes it out of that realm of just an extra fun thing or an extra thing when I can, later after I do all the other things. And yeah, it really, and I think that's what's so important. I'll also just say that it took again, I'm going to say till fairly recently for me to realize how it actually is an economical, where I have purged my closet of so many things that weren't right since we worked together on my palette. And I did that over a period of, like, again, a year and a half, where I kept taking buckets of things out. I would, like, not real I thought I had everything out, and then there was another layer, and I'd see more, like, oh, now these things don't seem to be right, And so I took, like, loads to charity. And and then, that was while I was continuing to purchase the right things in the right colors and the right styles as I would see them. And I have arrived now at a place where my closet feels like, really, there, I don't think there's anything in it now that isn't right and that I can't just go and wear any day. And that's a huge thing. I don't think I've ever had that, before, or even before, or it really is a big deal. And I have less, but I feel really good in what I have. And that, like you said, is just enormous. Most of us, we shop sales, and we're kind of, you can be shopping all the time and still have a closet full of things that you don't love, and that happens to so many people. So this definitely does. You may have less, but you'll have incredible quality, and you'll feel fantastic in everything that you have. And that just makes a really big difference day to day, much less when you're really in a more prolific kind of, you know, mode of operation in your business.
I believe this work is foundational to a happier, healthier, more prosperous life.
Mhm.
At the same time, there's 100% of the time resistance. Very few people come to me who say, "May I please have a palette?" Okay, like it's not something that is appealing necessarily, and like we've been talking, the resistance, the financial investment, as well as other resistance and confrontations come up. So what I'd like to say is, if this conversation has inspired you in your womb, in your heart, in your body, in your skin, like I just got the chills, like if you have some sort of body experience from this conversation, then maybe value that. And then you can also hold space for the resistance or confrontation or doubt about financial worthiness, right? Like to hold both and to recognize, like, we all have resistance in most areas of life, right? And so just to recognize, okay, there's resistance, or you might not see it as resistance. I don't really think I'm can spend this kind of money, right? On one hand, and on the other hand, but my body is talking to me. My body is excited. And so what I like to say is, if your body in some way has an effect from this idea, or like if you like love color so much and it's just something you've always loved, like Crayola crayons and paints and fabrics, like if you've always been someone who loves color, or if this conversation has sparked something, then I just highly consider you, or I invite you to consider, to value that while holding space for the questioning and
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
darkness that can come up.
Something that I've observed and experienced at times is when a woman dresses really beautifully and is really, again, in that really full expression, in what she's wearing, the quality of what she's wearing and the colors and the whole thing, and just, really like a sort of living piece of art. Um, because culturally, many have issues, the issues we've been talking about this, the concepts that we've been talking about. Um, Sometimes women get sort of grief for looking so beautiful in a certain way. So from other women, sometimes, unfortunately, again, it's the shadowy kind of stuff. So where someone will say, I've actually had the experience of it being said to me at times, like almost resentfully, where someone will say, you're always so put together. It's not a compliment. It's like, there's some sort of an edge, or so that type of, a little bit of an edgy comment that can almost make you feel like you're doing something wrong by caring so much, right? So I'm just wondering, Martha, it looks like you're really relating to or resonating with what I'm saying. I'm just wondering, why don't we go to you
Yeah.
first for that reason? I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
comments on that.
Yeah. It's so real what you're describing. It's so real.
Yeah.
Um, um, and the sisterhood wound, this what you're describing is a sisterhood wound, and it's prevalent in our cultures, and we get to unwind it by operating from our hearts. So if we're, walking around fully expressed and presenting in a beautiful, energetically harmonious way, it's like walking around with an open heart. And if someone makes a comment, then somehow curating it in a way that's loving,
Yeah.
you know, and the recognition that our beauty, our Catherine, my teacher, our teacher taught us this, that our authentic beauty is a contribution. Beauty uplifts, beauty opens hearts, beauty creates a world that's magnetic and divine to be in. And so it's really a rewiring of the sisterhood wound of who are you to look so great, that thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a unwinding of that, and substituting with the truth that no, my beauty is a contribution, your beauty is a contribution. Our authentic expression as a female bodied human, our authentic beauty is part of our divine nature. And when we are living in that frequency, we are actually impacting in a positive way. And for those who feel are triggered by it or whatever, we're still showing them what's possible.
Mhm.
We're still planting a seed for them to maybe acknowledge them. And for me, it's not about, like, you can see I'm not wearing, I'm wearing lipstick, but I'm not wearing makeup. Like, I don't try to look beautiful. It's not about that. I'm dressing and presenting in my essence, which then brings out my inner beauty, but it's not an external beauty. So to me, it feels like a more pure approach to presentation. And no one can argue with being a pure human, right?
Right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Interesting.
sure.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Catherine, on that same topic. Have you had the experience of that happening to you, Catherine? Of someone, actually kind of seeming a little threatened or uncomfortable because, the sense is always that they wouldn't give themselves permission to do it. So how could you?
Um, I think the comment that I'm most familiar with, which actually does relate to our topic on prosperity, is people sort of assuming that I've spent a vast amount of money and therefore I must be, superbly wealthy or something
Right,
like that. It's like they say, oh, well, I wouldn't be able to afford to do that,
right.
is the statement that comes to mind. Um, and often, if I know something about that person and how they live, it's often I know that it's definitely not that I have more wealth than they do. It's just a difference. It's what we've been talking about here. It's a different approach to prosperity, and the way that I've transformed myself through doing this work is, yes, I am now willing to invest in myself and in my clothes. And these things that Martha said are, those are the reasons for it, because I've seen this in a much broader context than just about clothing and dressing. Um, as I see it, I mean, at one level, of course, we're all individuals, and part of this work is on the premise that Mother Nature doesn't make any mistakes. We're all different, we're all individuals. Everything about us is communicating something energetic to others, and we want to complement that. So that's one thing. But on the other side, we can look at it from a more spiritual perspective and say that, each one of us, and we're talking about women here, each one of us is just one representation of the divine feminine, right? So there's, in a world where, many women now have been awakening to the whole, feminine field and, healing those patriarchal wounds, as Martha mentioned, or wanting to see that healing, wanting to see the more validation of the feminine in the world. And this is one way in which we contribute to this happening. We show up as our own unique representation of the divine feminine in a world that's really hungry to experience her.
Right.
That, right? So this is one way that we could see it in this larger thing. This is one way that we really help to transform. And as Martha said, beauty heals. Beauty heals. It's one of the principles of love. And as I said before, it's, that prosperity consciousness that is love-based as opposed to lack and fear-based. And so, yeah, if we want to put it all in a spiritual context, there are many more reasons than just looking good. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this has been, I think this has just been such a juicy conversation with both of you. I'm so grateful. I think that it's going to just really be meaningful to the people who are listening, to the women who are listening. Yeah, and you've really, really, both of you have just really put this in such a different perspective than I think most and I feel like I've had this perspective, but listening to both of you today has further deepened it for me, for sure, because you're really anchoring it into completely different drivers of this entire thing. And so that's really cool. I just love, very uplifting. So I want to give each of you a chance now to share a bit about the gift that you'd like to offer listeners. So why don't you go ahead, Martha, and share about your gift?
Oh, sure. My gift is the beginning excerpt of my book, Embrace Your Vibrance, Practices for Vibrancy Activation. And it encourages 26 practices that bring a woman to her vibrancy activation, one of which is the color work. And it includes the incorporation of sexuality as well. So it's the beginning excerpt of that book, and I hope you enjoy it.
Yes, I'm going to download it. That's
Yay.
great. Yes. And what about you, Catherine?
And mine is a PDF. It's 10 ways to look like a goddess. So it's 10 styling tips and tips about color that you can employ straight away. Even if you haven't got a palette, you can employ those tips straight away to start the journey. And then, of course, a palette would enhance it. But the tips booklet will give you some just handy tips on putting outfits together and things like, how, using hair, skin and eye colors, things like that.
Yeah, cool. How exciting and fun. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Thank you both again so very much. And we'll say goodbye for now.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So fun to
Thank you.
be with you.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Conversation.
Absolutely.